So I'll get that started. All right. So hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Catherine. I'm with the Richmond Hill Bryan County Chamber of Commerce, and we are glad that we were able to bring you a Grits in Government virtual series. As you know, we have a wonderful meal at the city center and have breakfast together. But with everything going on, we decided this was the best way to go about it this year. And we still wanted to bring you the great information that our communities put together for our priorities for this next year. And still wanted to have our special guests and representatives in front of you. So this was our compromise, and we hope you're enjoying these calls. If you've missed any of our calls before, they are all on our YouTube page. You can go up there and watch any of them. We do have two more to finish out the series. So on Tuesday, we'll hear from Georgia Economic Development and the Georgia Ports Authority. And then next Thursday, we'll hear from Representative Jesse Petrie. So keep an eye out for those reminders. But at this time, I do want to introduce today's special guest, Congressman Budy Carter. We are so glad to have you with us today. We know you are very busy up in DC right now, so we appreciate all that you do for our community. But Congressman Carter does represent the 1st District of Georgia in the House of Representatives. So we are, or excuse me, Congress. Sorry. Yes,
it is
thank
House.
you. House, thank you. That's what I thought. I was
You're
like,
right.
I get confused with all of y'all. So, but we are so grateful for all that you do for Bryan County. We know that you are a lifelong resident of the 1st District, so we are glad to have you representing us. But this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. We, just so everyone on the call knows, we did send Congressman Carter over our priorities for the 2021 session as he goes into session and has Bryan County on his mind. So, Congressman Carter, I'll give you the floor.
Well, Catherine, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity always to be with y'all, and I appreciate Bryan County so much. And I have to tell you, I am so impressed. You know, my district includes the entire coast of Georgia, and I live in Pooler, so I'm always on I-95, buzzing back and forth. And that interchange on I guess it's Daniel Siding Road or wherever it is, that it is really really coming along. It looks like it's going to be finished before long, and then we've got the big interstate program going on, or construction going on, at I-95 and I-16, and they're actually making a lot of good headway there as well. So lots of good things going on in the 1st District. And I'm up in Washington right now. Came up yesterday. We're in today and yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and then we come back. There's a possibility we may be in this weekend, but the probability is that we'll come back Monday. We're in what we call the lame duck session. That is the session between the time, I should say, between the election of the 117th Congress and the completion of the 116th Congress. So it's still the 116th Congress. We've got, as I say, one more week, but we got a lot of work to do before we can get out of here and get back to our districts. And that's very important. Certainly one of the things that we've got to do and is essential is to pass a budget. And our budget in the federal government runs from October 1st to September the 30th. Now, it expired on September the 30th, and back then what this Congress did was to kick the can down the road and pass a continuing resolution, which simply means that we just continue on with what we've been doing for the past year until December the 11th. December the 11th will be next Thursday. We have to get something done before then, or else the federal government will shut down. Nobody wants to shut down. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, nobody wants that. It's just not a good scenario for anybody. There are no winners, there are only losers in that kind of situation. So we've got to get something done. Now, there is ongoing talks right now. There's discussion on a $1.4 trillion package to get us through the end of the current fiscal year. And the appropriations budget includes 12 different programs, different areas. And the Appropriations Committee is working on all 12 of those to try to get those passed. There are a number of things that we can do in order to avoid a government shutdown on next Thursday, December the 11th. First thing we could do is to appropriate for all 12 of those departments that I mentioned. And that's what we're trying to do. The second thing we could do is to do exactly what we did the last time, and that is to kick the can down the road a little bit further and to just extend it with a continuing resolution on into the next year. I personally don't think that's the right thing to do. I think it's the responsibility of this Congress, the 116th Congress, to address that situation, so that we should be responsible for that and not put that burden on the 117th Congress that's coming in. But it is a way that we can avoid a shutdown. The third thing that I'll mention is what's called an omnibus. And an omnibus is simply just a one big package, and you just combine all 12 of those different departments that I was talking about into one package, and you just move forward. But I am confident that we'll get something done. I am hopeful that it will be the first scenario that I described, and that is that we'll pass something that addresses all 12 of the different departments within the appropriations budget. So we'll see what happens there. But again, I am confident we'll get that done. Also, there's a program called the NDAA. That's the National Defense Authorization Act, and that is extremely important. For the past 50 years, we have always passed the NDAA. There's been progress that has been made on that. The defense funding is obviously very, very important. The holdup right now, there has been talk about renaming some of our bases. That some of our bases our military bases are named after Confederate soldiers, after Confederate heroes, and there is a push to get that changed. The latest compromise that I have been made aware of, and that was right after lunch today, is that evidently they're talking about appointing a commission with the responsibility and with the charge, if you will, of over the next 3 years coming up with recommendations on what we should do. This is very important, and certainly we need to have the NDA passed. We need to have it passed for us in the 1st District. Keep in mind, we have a strong military presence in our district. Fort Stewart, Hunt Army Airfield, Kings Bay Naval Base, Moody Air Force Base, all of those are extremely important. There's no question, and all of them, depend on the NDAA. So we have to make sure that we get that done, and I am very confident that we will get it done. I'm very confident that we'll get it done before we leave here. The other thing I want to mention is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is extremely important. 2 parts to that, if you will. First of all, the vaccine. And the news of that has been very good. It's been very hopeful and very encouraging. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals has reported that their vaccine has been found to be 90% effective. They actually applied for an emergency use authorization, an EUA, from the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. That will be considered and voted on. It's being considered right now, but it will be voted on next Wednesday, December the 10th. Moderna is another company that is using the same type of therapy, if you will, of developing the vaccine. It's called a messenger RNA. It's the way that vaccine is delivered in the body. And they have also applied for an EUA. Theirs will be heard on the next Wednesday, December the 17th. So we will find out on December the 10th about Pfizer, and I fully expected it will be approved. It's already been approved in Europe, in England, and I expect for it to be approved here in the United States on the 10th, and I expect for the Moderna to be approved on the 17th. There is a third one made by AstraZeneca that is a different type of a vaccine, in the sense that the delivery is different. It actually uses the vaccine itself, a part of the vaccine, to deliver the antibodies. And what that does is that's still under research, but it is looking very promising, and it should be coming up pretty soon. Now, once that those 2 vaccines become available, there are some challenges in the distribution part of it. Distribution and administration are going to be, when I say administration, I mean the injection, the actual injection. Those are going to be 2 important parts of it. As far as the distribution goes, the CDC has an advisory council that it has made recommendations on who should receive that vaccine first. 39% of all the people who have died as a result of COVID are in nursing homes. That advisory committee has recommended that nursing home patients and nursing home workers be among the first to get that, and that healthcare workers be among the first to get those vaccines when they become available. It is estimated that Pfizer will be able to come out with about 20 million doses right here before the end of the month. Now, that won't be enough to handle all of the nursing home patients, all of the nursing home workers, and all of the healthcare workers. We have 21 million healthcare workers alone here in the United States. So that decision will have to be made on which healthcare workers get it as well. Now, two things to remember about the advisory committee and their recommendations. The first thing to remember is they are just that, recommendations. Dr. Robert Redfield, who is the executive director of the CDC, will decide today, later on this afternoon, whether to accept those recommendations from the advisory council or not. Those, if he accepts them, and I expect he will, he normally does, but if those are accepted, then those will be the CDC recommendations. States can decide whether they want to accept those recommendations or not. They don't have to accept the CDC recommendations. The governor and the state elected officials are responsible for making the decision on who's going to get the vaccine and who's not going to get the vaccine. So normally they will follow the guidelines of the CDC, and I expect that will be the case again this time. But they do have the right to go with their own direction if they want to. So just to make that clear. So that distribution is going to be very important. And I might add that there are some challenges to the distribution. The Pfizer vaccine has to be kept at minus 94 degrees. That is very cold. And Pfizer has actually developed some suitcases, if you will, that have dry ice in it that will store those vials in order for them to be distributed. That's going to be very important. Moderna's vaccine doesn't require that low of a temperature. So it is a little bit different there. There are some challenges with that. Now, the last thing I'll mention is this, and that's about the COVID-19 coronavirus relief. As you know, we've already passed 4 packages. I refer to it often as 3.5 packages because really the 4th package was nothing more than more money for the 3rd package. But the 4 packages appropriated, and I use that word appropriate, they appropriated $3 trillion. That's with a T. First time I've ever voted on a bill that had T behind it. That's a lot of money. There's no question about it. I voted for all 4 of those bills, and if I had to do it over again, I'd vote for all 4 of them again. They were necessary. They included good programs. It included the stimulus. It included the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been so very important in our country, not only in our country, but also in the 1st Congressional District. In the 1st Congressional District, we have saved over 111,000 jobs thanks to the PPP. We have had almost 11,000 businesses within the 1st District alone that have been recipients of the PPP. And keep in mind, that's a program, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, didn't even exist a year ago. That was a program that the federal government came up with to address the situation that we're currently experiencing now. So it did include a number of good things. Now, here's my concern right here in a nutshell. I mentioned earlier that we appropriated $3 trillion, and we did appropriate $3 trillion. Of that $3 trillion that we appropriated, we've still got almost $1 trillion that we have not spent yet. Included in that is almost $500 billion that was through the Main Street Lending Program that was intended for the bigger businesses that really didn't use it because they got better options in the private sector. Also, there's $138 billion left in the PPP that is just sitting there. So all tallied, you have almost $1 trillion that has already been appropriated but hasn't been spent yet. Why do we need to add more to our national debt right now. When we got that money, all we need to do is to reappropriate it, or redirect it, I should say, to where it needs to go. Now, currently, there are a number of proposals being. Mitch McConnell, the President Pro Tem of the United States Senate, is wanting to include what's referred to as a skinny bill, which would be almost just $500 billion. If you can refer to $500 billion as skinny, that's difficult for me to do. But anyway, that's the kind of numbers we talk about here in Washington, D.C. Included in what he wants to do is something that is vitally important in my mind and is essential, and that is business liability. We have to have that. That has to be part of whatever we go forward with. Now, the Speaker and the Democrats a couple of months ago passed a bill that called for another $2 trillion. Just recently, earlier this week, a bipartisan group of senators and House members came up with a plan that calls for right under $1 trillion and includes that business liability in it. The Speaker has said that that's what we should use as a basis, as a starting point, if you will. So I'm a little encouraged now. I didn't really think that we were going to get this done before next year and before the next Congress, but I kind of changed my tune on that a little bit. I think there is a possibility we will get it done if we continue to make progress like we have. But I will tell you that bipartisan bill that I mentioned, that's right under $1 trillion, it uses a lot of the existing funds. In fact, only a third of it is new funds. So I like that. And that's the way I think we ought to be doing it. It includes some infrastructure projects as well. And, you know, I struggle a little bit with that because I want it to focus only on COVID. But, you know, if I can get something, if I can get something I can vote on, then I'm going to grab hold of it and go with it. So that's the concern I have at this point. So a lot going on in Washington right now. I mean, we are packing a lot into this last month, and you know, it's always exciting up here, always a lot going on. But I tell you, this year more than any year, I think it has really been just gangbusters up here. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear there might be a little bit of room for some work on the relief package. I know there's still several businesses that would benefit from that, and so many more. So I don't have any questions so far from anybody on the call. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and send those in for me. One thing I just wanted to ask, just to kind of see, was there anything kind of pre-COVID legislation wise that y'all were really working towards for this year that kind of got put on the back burner because of COVID? Were there any kind of major legislation that y'all wanted to see get pushed through?
Well, I think there were, and certainly you can blame it on COVID, if you will. Healthcare is one of the biggest subjects up here right now, and I'm not sure that we could have really gotten anything done with it even without COVID, to be quite honest with you. It's become such an alienating issue and such a partisan issue. And of course, we all know the relationship between this current speaker and this current president is not warm and fuzzy, and they have not gotten along well at all. So it would be hard to say that that's the reason why. I will tell you the biggest disappointment I have at the 116th Congress has been that we did not address infrastructure. Infrastructure should be a bipartisan project. Everybody understands how important that is. And it's important to Republicans, Democrats, independents. It's not a partisan issue. I thought we could get that done, and I thought we would get it done. We really haven't. And keep in mind, when I say infrastructure, if you were to ask everybody on this call to define infrastructure, you'd probably get that many different answers. I think most of us, when we think of infrastructure, we think roads and bridges. And certainly that's an important part of it. But it's much more than that. Particularly in our district, when we talk about infrastructure in our district, you got to think about the ports. That's infrastructure. You got to think about, all the other things that happen in our district. All of those things are infrastructure. High-speed internet, broadband to our rural areas. To me, that's infrastructure. And that's certainly something that's got to be addressed, and certainly something that, excuse me, something that has been brought to the limelight during this COVID-19 pandemic, because we've seen telehealth and telemedicine and so many other things that have that we are really dependent on now to become an essential part of our healthcare delivery system. Not only that, but the situation that exists with our schools, with kids being out of schools and having to work from home virtually. Keep in mind that there are a lot of areas, a lot of rural areas that don't have high-speed internet, and those kids are at a disadvantage because they don't have access to it. You know, you hear all these stories about kids driving to the public library and sitting in their car outside the public library in order to get high-speed internet. And, you know, that's the kind of thing we've got to address throughout our district and throughout our country.
Yes, we are very blessed. I actually spoke to someone today. They've every day on my way to work, we've got one of our fiber companies digging every day. So we are definitely blessed in our area that we have companies investing in that for Bryan County. So I've got a couple questions that came in. They're a little long-winded, so hang in there with me.
Okay.
Since you are a pharmacist, if a person over 60 or one that has more comorbidities, I don't know what that word is, or maybe more health issues, how do they present themselves to get an earlier vaccine after the first responders and nursing home residents? Will some documentation have to be presented, or can they just show up and describe their qualifying condition?
Well, actually, that's a great question, Catherine, because, you know, the advisory committee that I mentioned met earlier this week and came up with recommendations that Dr. Redfield is going to decide on later on today. They, you know, they identified nursing home residents because, as I say, 39% of all the deaths associated with COVID have been from nursing home residents. And they also identified healthcare workers, and they need, and I think that was pretty easy. After you get past that, then it becomes pretty difficult. But the vulnerable, those who are most at risk, have got to be next. I mean, look, you know, I'm not saying that the life of a 40-year-old healthy person is not as important as somebody over 60 who might have some health issues. But the point is that somebody over 60 who might have some health issues, you know, they are more vulnerable to this virus than the 40-year-old who is healthy. So those are the kind of decisions the advisory committee and CDC will go to the next round and decide who gets it next. And I'm sure that that's the time that they'll be considering the more vulnerable population outside of nursing homes and healthcare workers. But the good news is by January, you're going to see a lot more of the vaccine available. The vaccine, there'll be, you know, we're going to have 20 million in the first month that we're in right now in December, and after that, you'll have hundreds of millions.
Good news. All right, so the next two are a little more general. Is there an ongoing investigation into COVID, and if it was man-made, or who was behind it?
You know, I think, yes, there is an ongoing investigation into that. We have, you know, a China task force that is a special committee within the House that is looking into what happened with the World Health Organization, what happened in China and Wuhan, and how this virus got started. That investigation continues on, but I'll be quite honest with you. Most of the focus up here has been on a vaccine and been on the relief, and you know, we still are concerned about how it got started. We need to make sure that doesn't happen again. But at this point, most of the focus and most of the effort has been on developing a vaccine with Operation Warp Speed.
Okay. And the next question this person has, as the population continues to grow, which increases number of cars and fuel emissions, is there any discussion or committees that are looking at mass transit for the country or different areas? I know in larger areas like DC and New York and other major cities, this could be a way of reducing the number of vehicles, fuel, and emissions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly, you know, green initiatives are something that, and for those of you who might not know, I actually serve on the Select Committee for Climate Change. So I've been at the forefront of this, and I believe climate change is real, and I believe that we have to address it. There's no question, and certainly mass transportation is going to be something that is a big part of what we try to do. We made great progress. This country in the last 12 years, the United States of America, or I should say in the last decade, the last 10 years, the United States has decreased our carbon footprint more than the next 12 countries combined. All the time, during that time, we've also increased our economy. So it can be done. Again, we've decreased our carbon footprint over the last decade more than the next 12 countries in the world combined. So we're the leader here in the United States of America. That's why I get so frustrated with some people on the other side of the aisle who say we haven't done anything. Nothing can be further from the truth. We have done something. And yes, we are still using some fossil fuels, and I think we're going to have to use fossil fuels in the near future, but they're much cleaner than they were in the past. If you look at the coal that's being burned here in the United States, there's not much coal being burned anymore, but that is certainly a lot cleaner than what's being burned over in Russia and India and China. And that's where we really need to clean up the situation. But directly in response to the question, I would say yes, that mass transit is a big part of our plan to try to cut down on our carbon footprint, and it's very important. It's always amazed me, you know, New York City, my oldest son lived in New York City for a couple of years, and you know, he didn't even have a car when he was up there. I mean, everything they did was mass transit, and you know, they did use cabs and taxis, but they used primarily the subway system. Up here in Washington, D.C., I mean, it is big. Yet, you know, when I look at MARTA in Atlanta, I wonder, you know, why is it that it's not used as much as it is here in D.C. and New York? But it's not, and it's really a shame because it is a great way for us to decrease our carbon footprint.
Well, and it'll also be interesting to see how COVID affects that, with more companies having people work from home and things like that. That potentially could have a positive effect as well. So,
well, you're exactly right, and I think it could have an impact. I've been telling people, you know, I mean, we become so used to it. I'm not sure a lot of these companies are going to go back.
yeah.
They will go back some, but I don't think that, you know, I think it's going to be a combination, a hybrid, if you will, of a combination of work at home as well as, you know, go back to office space. And I think it's going to have an impact on commercial office space as well. So we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out.
I said that from the get-go. It definitely will be interesting to watch. But yeah, I still have plenty of people that are still working from home. So it has changed pretty much every aspect of our lives. So, well, I don't have any other questions. So Congressman Carter, it is always a pleasure to chat with you and see you, even if it is virtually. We want to congratulate you on your reelection and want to thank you for all that you've done for Bryan County and continue to do. Know that we are always here to serve you and help you in any way. So thank y'all so much for joining our call. Just another reminder, we have 2 more calls left in the series. Next Tuesday will be the Georgia Ports Authority and Georgia Economic Development Authority. And then next Thursday will be Representative Jesse Petrie. So we thank y'all for joining us and hope y'all have a great rest of the week. So thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.